In Lesson 1, we learned about note heads and how to read them on the grand staff using the treble and bass clefs. But how do we know how long to hold each note? Well, that's where rhythm comes in. Before we talk more about that, I want to highlight the importance of rhythm in music by playing a very well-known tune without any rhythmic variation. Boring, right? It had no character or personality, and we just know that's not how the song goes. On the flip side, if I just clap the rhythm to the song without the pitches, maybe you recognize it because I just played the tune, but otherwise you probably wouldn't know what I was clapping. And that's why pitch and rhythm must both be present when we're creating or playing music. One is not necessarily more important than the other. We're going to talk about note values in a second, but first, I want to point out the difference between pulse and rhythm, because I think people sometimes get them jumbled in their heads. When you're listening to a song and you're tapping your feet or you're bobbing your head to the music, you're most likely doing that to the pulse of the song. The pulse is the steady underlying beat of the music that continues throughout. Sometimes the pulse or beat is fast, and sometimes it's slow. Now, rhythm is the pattern of note duration on top of that steady pulse. So here's the pulse of Happy Birthday. And here's the rhythm on top. So let's talk about note values. You remember our note head, right? Now let's add a stem. Notes that look like this last for one beat and are called quarter notes. So if I get my steady pulse going again, and I see 4 quarter notes, I'd play a note for each quarter note and count 1.
1, 1, 1, 1.
Now, when we see quarter notes, it's tempting to just think, oh, that gets 1 beat, and simply count 1. While yes, that's kind of the right way to do it, it's not complete without also having your steady pulse in mind. Because a 1 in a slow pulse
1, 1.
will last a lot longer than a 1 in a quick pulse.
1, 1.
If I erase the center of the note head, we get a half note, which lasts for 2 counts or beats. And if I erase the stem, we get a whole note, which gets 4 beats. Working backwards, we can see that these note value names make sense. If a whole note gets 4 beats, then a half note, or half of 4, would get 2 beats. And a quarter of a whole note is 1. Now there's one more note value I want you to remember. It's actually not a value, but a rule. I call it the rule of the dot. You can think of the dot as an addition sign. Anytime we put a dot to the right of a note head, it automatically adds half of the note's value to itself. For example, here I have a half note, which we know gets 2 beats. Now I'm going to add a dot to the right, So I need to add half of 2, which is 1, to the 2 beats that are already there. So we get 3 because 2 plus 1 equals 3. And we call this a dotted half note. If we added a dot to the whole note to make a dotted whole note, how many beats would that get? Pause the video if you want to think about it before we work through the answer together. So we know that a whole note gets 4 counts. Once we add the dot, we know we will be adding half of its value to itself. Half of 4 is 2, so 4 plus 2, or a whole note plus the dot, equals 6. And that's the rule of the dot. Now, it seems like music should only be audible sound, right? But silence is actually an important part as well. Silence can create drama, tension, awkwardness, and it can help give melodies some personality. These silences are marked in sheet music with rests. Rest values are named and counted just like our other note values. A quarter rest gets 1 beat of silence. A half rest gets 2, and a whole rest usually gets 4 beats. I said it usually gets 4 beats because there are exceptions to the whole rest, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Let's look at Mozart's sonata in C major. And we're going to take a minute to identify everything we've learned so far. We've got the treble clef and bass clef, the grand staff connected together with this squiggly line or brace, and we have note heads and stems. Now, do you recognize any of our 3 important notes that we learned at your last lesson? I see middle Cs, treble Gs, and bass Fs. And we just learned that these are quarter notes and these are half notes. And we know that these right here are quarter rests. So we already know quite a lot. Yay! Now let's check out these lines here. These are called bar lines and they separate notes into nice and neat measures. There are 4 measures. Now look at this. This is called the time signature, and it's found at the beginning of pieces. When we refer to it, we say 4/4 time. The top number tells us that in every single measure, there are 4 beats. If we look at the first measure here and add up the note values in the right hand, we can see that they do add up to 4 because a half note plus 2 quarter notes equals 4 beats. Same with the second measure. So now that we know what a time signature is, instead of just counting 1, 1, 1, 1 for 4 quarter notes, we count 1, 2, 3, 4 for every measure. Okay, let's try some other rhythms in 4/4 time. I'm first going to write in the counts. And now I want you to try to either tap the rhythm or pick one key on the piano and play the rhythm on that note. Here's our steady pulse. And now let's tap or play and count this rhythm.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good. Now what if we saw this? Remember, it's the top number that we're concerned about. This 3 tells us that there are 3 beats in every measure. So we count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and we feel a nice strong beat 1. 2 quick side notes. First, I told you the top number of the time signature tells us how many beats are in each measure. The bottom number has a different function, but for now, we're just going to ignore it as it's not yet important for us to know. And second, I mentioned that usually the whole rest gets 4 beats of rest, with some exceptions. Now that you know about time signatures and measures, I can tell you the real value of a whole rest is a whole measure of rest. So if you're in 4/4 time, a whole measure of rest will be 4 beats. But if you're in 3/4 time, a whole measure of rest will only be 3 beats. Let's test your ear. I'm going to play some tunes, and let's see if you can tell whether they're in 4/4 time or 3/4 time. And I'm going to exaggerate the strong beats a bit. So in 3/4 time, beat 1 is strong, and in 4/4 time, beats 1 and 3 feels strong, with 1 being the strongest. Before you give me your answers, I want you to listen to them one more time and count in whatever time signature you think it is. So if you think it's in 3/4 time, you'll count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if you think it's in 4/4 time, you'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's hear them again. All right, let's check out the answers. Number 1 was in 4/4 time. The right hand was kind of all over the place rhythmically, but the left hand was giving you a nice steady pulse with stronger beats on 1 and 3. And number 2, which was Linus and Lucy, was also in 4/4 time. In this piece, though, the left hand was a little offbeat rhythmically, but the right hand was nice and solid, especially on your strong beats 1 and 3. And finally, number 3 was in 3/4 time. Even though this is a really gentle piece, could you sense the slightly stronger feel on beat 1? If you had trouble picking out the time signatures, do not worry. The more you learn, play, and consciously listen to music, the easier it'll be to pick out those types of things. For your assignment, I want you to download the short practice exercises below. I've combined reading music and rhythm on the grand staff for you to practice. Now let's quickly talk about practicing. Some things that we learn in life, we only have to learn once, like the fact that bee stings hurt. Avoid bees. But learning how to play the piano takes consistent practice. So if you play through these exercises once and think, oh, I'm done, you're not setting yourself up with the practice habits necessary to really see improvement. So ideally, you'll download these exercises and start practicing them. Maybe you want to set a goal of practicing 5 days a week for 5 to 10 minutes a day. It's totally fine to start out with very small attainable goals. We're starting simple, and I highly recommend recording yourself. When you're playing, it can be difficult to really listen to how you're sounding because you're so focused on the action of playing. And when you listen back to your recording, I bet you'll probably hear a lot of little things that you can tweak. So build that strong practice habit foundation. And we'll eventually dive deeper into efficient practice and ways to really help you progress. But for now, remember that our piano journeys can last a lifetime. So stay patient with yourself and enjoy the process. Next time, we're talking about scales and the formula for building them. These are essential to understanding music theory concepts, so you don't want to miss it. If you found today's lesson helpful, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.